little bit about the difference between like high leptin and low leptin? Are they both considered leptin resistance,
Mhm.
and how do they differ with treatment?
Yeah, I mean, it just so there's like so many, not so many, but there's a few different ways of looking at this. Now, just to add as a side point, when I did reverse the leptin resistance and optimize my fertility, obviously and got pregnant, I had lost 30 pounds by
Mhm.
the end of all of that. Like I had, when I was doing all this stuff, I wasn't trying to lose weight because you don't want to try to lose weight if you're trying to get pregnant. It shouldn't be like the goal, but it was a side effect of doing all this stuff and optimizing my leptin levels. And so um, you can be low leptin, overweight, which I was. I wasn't extremely overweight, but I was overweight. And you can also be a low leptin underweight, which I
Mhm.
do get a lot of those cases as well now. Um, and both have, similar like low carb, keto, carnivore, long term, yo yo dieting, history of all those types of things. And typically with low leptin, especially my low leptin underweight, there is a lot of nervous system dysregulation as well. Like those are the tough ones because there's typically nervous system dysregulation, and I have to send them to my friend Irene Lyon to work on
Yeah.
the nervous system as well, because it's like your body thinks you're like in a serious crisis. Like your body thinks you're in crisis. And so we have to work on the somatic pieces as well, and working on a lot of the circadian stuff and the stuff I teach, like grounding, going outside, being in nature, being away from your phone. A lot of that stuff is going to be a natural way to work on your nervous system without even having to go through an expensive program. So I'll just put that out there if somebody is like,
And I really hate to interrupt you. I should have asked you this first, like to say like what leptin actually is and what it
oh,
does.
yeah,
And we probably should have started with that.
yeah,
And then go back to the low versus high, just because
sure.
probably people like, what the heck is leptin? I don't even know what it
Yeah,
is and
yeah.
why I should care about it.
I mean, it's a master circadian signaling hormone. And so it signals the thyroid, it signals sex hormones, it signals the insulin glucose axis, which is huge, right? It modulates the immune system. It's very heavily correlated. Elevated leptin or leptin resistance is very heavily correlated in autoimmune conditions, mold toxicity, Cushing's disease, all these different kind of autoimmune conditions. Leptin resistance is there. And so again, it's a master circadian signaling hormone. It's meant to dock to the brain, and I say circadian because it's meant to dock to the brain at night between around 12 and 2 a.m. Everyone's a little bit different. Not everyone has the same exact hormonal cascades, but they're around about the same. And when leptin docks to the brain at night when you're sleeping, it's supposed to give like a report of how much stored energy is on the body, how much body fat is stored, and how much is glucose is stored in the liver. Like, what do we have on board? And so the next day, your body can kind of take directions. We need thyroid to operate this way. We need metabolism to operate this way. It's safe enough to make a baby or not. So it's kind of just it's a signaling hormone. I think that the master hormones that people miss, people like, oh, my hormones are a mess. I'm like, we got to start with leptin, cortisol, and melatonin, and they have a relationship as well. And so if your cortisol is too high, that can interfere with leptin. And same thing if cortisol is too low. If your melatonin is too low, that can interfere with leptin. All these hormones, I just did a newsletter on that last night. They kind of work in a circadian fashion, and they have kind of a symbiotic or they have relationships to one another. And so there's a range that I like for people, and a lot of people say my range is really too tight. And there is some leeway on that. But for women, and this is not medical advice, I like between about a 7 and a 10. And then men around 0 to 4. I have seen men be like in the negatives, like super low leptin after lots of carnivore keto fasting, because it's happening to men also, but you become leptin resistant before you become insulin resistant. And so it's kind of like this it's like a warning signal that something is not right in the body. It's like before you even get prediabetes, you become leptin resistant. And it's a lot of it comes down to this your master hormones being not optimized, out of sync, and this whole signaling process not being able to happen at night where you're sleeping. And one thing I think that happens a lot is so the leptin receptor and the insulin receptor, they sit right next to each other in the brain. And so they can compete with one another. So if you eat too close to bed, your insulin is elevated. That process doesn't happen. The leptin docking to the brain doesn't happen. If you sleep with a lot of blue light in your room, that also can raise insulin and blood sugar in the absence of food. That can prevent the docking from happening. um, Dopamine, anything that's going to prevent or block melatonin, because leptin and melatonin have this kind of symbiotic relationship. When leptin is at its highest point, like when it's supposed to be docking to the brain, melatonin is supposed to also be peaking as well. So they kind of operate at night on that sort of a symbiotic relationship.